What made you quit a job on the spot?
Nothing dramatic. After working my ass off during the pandemic and promised an additional bonus, I received a low performance review conveniently timed a day before my bonus was to be paid. The low performance feedback canceled my bonus. Given all the other bullcrap I was putting up with, I broke and quit. I had a nice month off and my new job pays significantly more. Never work for people that don't appreciate you. There are always others that will.
I used to cut grass in a cemetery. I used a push lawnmower and had to lift it up onto the elevated graves, and then back down and on to the next one. Over and over and over. Minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. After an hour of cutting grass in the August heat, I sit down for my break, and this guy named Leroy asks, "Was that worth $4.25 to you?" I quit the next day. Thanks, Leroy.
Asked for a raise and was told okay. Next morning, Friday, I was told by the same person who agreed with the raise that I should put a few more years in and then we'll talk again. Locked my toolbox at the end of the day and called a tow truck to pick it up. Shop manager was shocked that next Monday to find an empty spot where my tools were and couldn't understand why I left.
My grandfather, who I considered like a father, passed away after a long stay in hospital. We were closer than he was with his own kids, and our bond was quite special. I spoke to my manager about getting the day of his funeral off, since I was organizing part of the arrangements, and having a day or two of bereavement leave, and he agreed. The day of the funeral finally comes and the staff start calling me, leaving me messages asking why I'm not at my shift, and telling me, while I'm in a suit hosting family members at the funeral home, that I have to find someone to replace me or face repercussions. Needless to say, I told them to figure it out, and never looked back.
Walked into the interview, everything went well, accepted the job offer. Went to the front desk to do the paperwork and noticed that the contract had a different pay amount, and that I would be interning for the first month for $100 per week. I asked first about the amount difference, was told, "Oh, this the standard contract, it just hasn't been updated for your specific offer." I told him they'd need to edit and initial the changes before I would sign. "Oh, that's not how things work here." I thanked them for their time and left without signing anything. They called me back on the day I was supposed to have started asking where I was. I told them because didn't sign the contract, I was never an employee. Hoo boy, that was a fun call.
Worked for a privately owned bakery for exactly 1 week. The owner's son comes in, walks past the counter and into the bathroom. He comes out a few minutes later without acknowledging me or my coworker, gets into his car and drives away. We both looked at each other, then opened the door only to find this guy literally crap all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. I called the owner, told her what happened, and she said to deal with it. So I asked my coworker if she wanted to clean it up because I wasn't going to. She declined and I told her I was walking out. She did as well. We locked up the store and told the owner we quit but would reconsider staying if her son came back to clean up his own mess. She yelled and berated us for 20 seconds before I said goodbye and hung up.
Not me, but a middle-aged tradesman where I work. I work underground and it isn't for everybody, terrible environment and whatnot. This particular individual starting working and after a few weeks decided that it wasn't for him. Bad conditions and hostile supervisor. He approached the boss at the morning meeting and told him that he wasn't going underground and that he was quitting. The boss told him that he had to give him 2 weeks notice, and without missing a beat the guy replied, "For the next 2 weeks you're gonna notice that I'm not here," turned around, packed his crap and left. Was never heard from again.
I worked for T-Mobile store. Authorized reseller, not an actual dealer. 1 week. I had an amazing week. Sold 55 phones. Brand new activations on a business account with 55 high-end phones at that time. When I got my next check, they said my paperwork was not in order and thus they couldn't pay me. As a side note, they always told us to make copies of all paperwork in case this happened so you can show it to the manager and get it resolved within a day. I went over my backup paperwork with my boss. He said everything looked to be in order and he would have the office cut me a check. I went to the office, and they told me it was still not in order. I immediately gave them my store key and quit on the spot. I did go through collections and they did settle before I took them to court. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees and eventually lead to an investigation by the government, according to an old coworker I bumped into years later.
Worked as a cashier in a local shop. One night 2 guys came at me with knives trying to get in the till. I just walked away and said have at it, as it wasn't worth the minimum wage to get into it with a couple of guys waving knives at me. After they ran out the store, I picked up my mobile and called the police, then called the store manager. The next day, the district manager meets me as I turn up for my shift the very next day. Her first words were, "It was very unprofessional of me to be on my phone while in work." I laughed at her and told her she could take this as my notice and walked out. I never had a problem with being held up, but the sheer gall of that got me.
Once as a teenager at a new job, I got my hand smacked by the owner the first day because I was writing with my left hand. Walked out.
I got mugged on a delivery for Domino's, and came back to the shop crying and panicked, had my phone, wallet, and pizza taken, told my manager what happened. "Anon, are you hurt?" "No, but I lost my phone and wallet, I need to call the police." "No time for that, here's your next delivery." It was like 2 blocks from where I was just mugged. I just went home. The police never really did much to get my phone and wallet back, not like they could.
I had a boss scream, "This is a dictatorship and I'm the dictator," in a meeting while slamming his fist on the desk.
Began working at a Persian restaurant in the kitchen. I overcooked a steak slightly. The owner came back, threw a plate at us, then a hot meat skewer before storming off to his office. I dropped my apron, grabbed my bag, and told him I was leaving. His response was, "Okay, at the end of the night you can go." My response was, "Clearly you don't understand. I'm leaving right now. Here's my parking pass. I'll expect my check in the mail."
I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. We used to get a free McDouble or hot and spicy with a small fries and drink for our lunch break. One day when I went on break, the franchise owner was there, and when he noticed I asked for cheese on the hot and spicy, he attempted to make me pay for the whole meal because cheese wasn't free. I thought he was joking, so I laughed and started walking towards the break room until he yelled at me not to walk away from him in front of customers and my coworkers. I couldn't believe it. This grown-ass successful businessman was hounding at 16-year-old for a slice of cheese. Told him I wasn't gonna pay, put the food down and walked out. They tried calling me to come to work that weekend. I told them no thanks and never went back.
Getting reprimanded for not pushing a patient into getting a dental procedure he didn't need or want.
Lol. I had an inside hint from HR that there was about to be mass layoffs and my name was on the list. I scheduled my week-long vacation and returning the day before layoffs were presumed to have happened. My boss reamed me out for daring to take a vacation. She said I would never advance in the company if I chose such a formative time in a project to take a vacation. She told me I would never be an executive producer if I went on a vacation before project launch, even though I wouldn't be able to touch it for the week I was away anyways, and that I would always be known in the television industry as lazy. I chilled, took my vacation, and returned. She was mad and said that she was upset with me for having left and made her take care of my project for me, chewed me out in front of the entire company in the conference room. I chilled and was like, "Aren't you laying off a bunch of us tomorrow? I'm just waiting for you to fire me so I can collect unemployment." Entire room literally starts panicking and management tries to understand how the frick I knew about layoffs. It was my one true Regina George causing chaos moment in my life.
I am a physician assistant and took a job at an urgent care. After working there for about a month, I noticed some irregularities, such as some medications being expired and sometimes a lack of supplies. I wrote that off as the office manager not being as astute as she should have been and brought it up to the doctor who owned the place. He said he would talk to her and straighten it out. Then one of the medical assistants came to me and said, "You know this has been going on forever, right?" She then said that things would never change and to get used to it because the expired medications had been on the shelf for months and they were told to never throw them out. She then also told me that the autoclave, the machine that sterilizes instruments, was broken and all they did was wash the instruments in soap and water and put them in the autoclave anyway to get them as clean as possible. That was the end of that. I made out a formal complaint to the state medical board and never showed up again. The state actually came in the very next day and raided the place. They shut him down immediately. They found so many things wrong that not only did they keep the place out of business, they suspended his license. He was also prosecuted on federal charges because he was running a scam for truck driver physical exams.
Worked for a restaurant, pub. The owner would come in with his buddies for hours at a time, a lot of times forcing the bartender to stay way past close serving them. Obviously was told not to charge anything because it's the owner's party. After hours of drinks on the house, no tip. Not even from the owner. This started to happen frequently. Usually we'd put up with it if they'd leave or be done before close. Then we started hearing that the kitchen staff hadn't been paid in a month. Bartenders were being paid because we made like $4 an hour. But the kitchen wasn't a tipped kitchen and made a decent wage. Turns out the owner was a total drunk frickwit which should have been obvious and buried himself in debt. A week later we were told our checks weren't there on the day they were supposed to be. Then 2 days later still no checks. I told him if my check wasn't there tomorrow, I won't come in for my shift. They said it came. I got there. And they said, well, what I meant was it's actually on the way. I talked to the... and I walked out. I later found out no checks were ever issued there again. They tried to pay some people cash but it fell apart very soon after.
I worked for an attorney. I was 7 months pregnant. I was supposed to be a secretary but instead I was constantly being sent out as a process server. In July, at the end of my 3 months, August, I was supposed to get a raise and she said that she couldn't give me a raise. The day she said that, I left at lunch and never went back. She was an awful person and the guy the first replaced told me that he felt sorry for me on my first day as he was leaving. I should have left that day.
I got blamed for something that wasn't my fault. Was in an argument with our VP or marketing because I had the audacity to suggest a solution that would have avoided our problem instead of accepting fault for something I didn't do. He told me he doesn't pay me to think, so that was my last day.
I worked at Walmart for a short time. I worked as hard as I possibly could to unload their pallets of merchandise. I always thought I was so damn fast. I studied the process and I believed I perfected it. Every single day my manager came up to me and told me I needed to be faster. So I did, and the fast pace made me lose a little focus, causing me to break a finger. I let management know that I might be a little slower due to my injury and they straight up told me, we won't tolerate any laziness, and wrote me up when I didn't meet their ridiculous standards. So I went home after my shift, and never returned. Never called, never formally quit. I just never came back. Frick Walmart.
I was at a company for about a year and a half as an assistant project manager. In that year and a half, I had 3 different bosses, the newest one being a heavy micromanager. I was getting paid about 20% below the standard salary for the position, overworked without any additional compensation, and the overall culture of the company was just flawed. My boss started nitpicking my work at the end of the day. I told her I had plenty of time to get it done before the end of the day, but she kept pushing and escalating. She was borderline screaming and I just cut her off and said, I'm not doing this crap anymore, I quit. She yelled back, well, I need it in writing, and I said back with the straightest face, I don't have to do crap in writing. I quietly packed all my stuff up, said good luck to my coworkers, and left. A year later, after working a couple of other jobs, I accepted a project manager position with a competing company and make almost twice as much as I was making at the previous. And I get to post on Reddit while at work without getting yelled at.
Fun times. Working at a grocery store when I was a teenager. I was still out on my own, but working anything I could to make ends meet. I guess I didn't work hard enough being a one-man crew in front of a store manager who decided to tell me to go faster, impossible, and do even better for my 4.25 per hour. I tried explaining I was going as fast as personally possible when he decided to say, you'll do what you are told, as fast as you're told if you want to keep this job. You should be so lucky. Decided right then and there, bro, I'd rather starve than work for some stupid frick whose high point in life is the assistant manager at a buy-low grocery store. Quit on the spot.
I was asked to lie to parents and cover up a kid failing, in elementary school, by support staff. When I confronted the principal about it, he said that she was just doing her job and I was not a team player for not doing so. So I explained the situation. Same response, I should have helped in covering it up. As soon as kids went home, I started emptying my desk.
I get a job at a restaurant. First day I show up and the heat is broken in the dead of winter. It was like 35 degrees. I ask the cooks if it's always like this, and they say yes. I walked immediately.
I was 18. On my lunch, a drunk manager came in the break room, asked me a bunch on invasive personal questions, and when I was curt and evasive, she exited the room, closed the door, and announced to the office, "What a beach." Gathered my stuff and walked out. An assistant manager followed me out and tried to block my car from pulling out of the parking lot. I pulled around him and left. Heard later that the story going around the office was that I almost ran him down in the parking lot. Not even close.
Had a job about 10 years ago doing tech support for an ISP for a week. The pay was minimum wage plus bonuses you earned for selling people stuff. And by stuff I mean terrible, overpriced services that you can get online for free. I was still in the phase of training where I had a supervisor listening in on my calls, and after a call, he told me I should have paused to try and sell him some crappy antivirus service before I fixed his problem. Handed in my headset right there. Felt so skeevy when people call you for help and you have to turn into a telemarketer.
Worked at a restaurant as a server. We just catered a large wedding reception. The owner's wife was chatting with the wedding party all night and occasionally getting the drinks. At the end of the night she said she's taking her share of the tips since she helped so much. I say fine, even though that's illegal in our state. An hour and a half after the party ends, the restaurant is still a mess and the owner's wife is just standing around talking while I was supposed to clean up. It was almost midnight and I'd worked my other job earlier that day. I walked out without saying a word. They ended up giving me all of my tips on my last check.